Welcome to a special edition of Education Matters. This is about the reopening of our schools, hopefully in the fall, searching for the new normal. With me as a guest is Dr. Robert Zywicki. He's the superintendent of the Mount Olive School District in Morris County. He has laid out a plan for his district that I think has some flexibility that he wants to discuss with us. So welcome, Dr. Zywicki. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's good to be back with you again.
It's good to be with you too. First of all, before we get into the mechanics of opening schools, why don't we start to talk about what's happened to our kids academically? How do you see what happened to our students academically during this closure? Because it's been a pretty long time. We weren't expecting this.
No, it's so funny that, when we started this, it was going to be 2 weeks, and then it was going to be spring break, and then it was May 15th. And, here we are, it's practically July. Today was actually the last day of school in Mount Olive. So, a couple of things. When you look at, there's a new study, a white paper that just came out from UVA, from NWEA, and from Brown that really is projecting about 50% of learning loss. Another study from Ray McNulty, and this is with students using the amazing personalized learning platform Achieve 3000, that's also predicting about 50% of learning loss. So we can't go into next year thinking that all kids are at grade level. So with that in mind, at Mount Olive, one of the things that I'm super proud of that we did is that we ran our RTI program the entire time we were in closure from day one. So we were providing tier 2 and tier 3 interventions via synchronous remote learning from the very beginning. We also benchmarked all of our kids for Lexile level and also using the Lincoln benchmark system in June. And based upon that data, we're running really intensive RTI programs over the summer. We're doing a hybrid ESY program. So I think this is gut check time. We need to be really honest about where kids are at. I know the commissioner and Dr. Peggy McDonald has done a lot of work on this, and I've spoken to them about this. But I think for districts and boards of education, they need to give themselves some flexibility and really start planning for interventions. I think that's one of the most important things. The other thing that's happened is, I'm speaking as a parent of 4 kids and a superintendent that has almost 5,000 kids. The social emotional toll of isolation is impacting academics. So everyone needs to be prepared for behavioral issues when kids come back to school for the first time, being around all these kids in a room in September. What is that going to look like? Seeing teachers, right? So they're not just going to go back and go right back to, back to the grindstone of doing traditional learning. So I think we need to look at the social emotional impact and plan for the fact that there's probably going to be 50% regression for most kids.
So what you're telling me, this is not going to be a school opening like any other one that we plan for. We have to really focus on a lot more, at least in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the kids, their social emotional well-being. I'm going to include the staff too in that.
Absolutely.
Remark, but also where the kids are academically. So we're going to have to spend a lot more time figuring out where everyone is.
Absolutely. And for the staff, burnout is a big concern. They did, our teachers, they've never had to do what we've asked them to do. And, September 1st is not that far away. So I'm hoping they can recharge in time. But, I know in my district, like most others, we're doing lots of summer professional development. It's really, it's the summer that's not. And also because with travel limitations, a lot of people are not going to be going on vacation. So, there's going to be stress and burnout, definitely that manifests itself when we come back in September.
Now, you said it, and I agree. September's not that far away, and it'll get here faster than we think. What are you doing now? How are you structuring your staff, your administrative staff, to start preparing for September?
So in the second week in May, I prepared my Board of Education, and I want to give them a huge shout out. My board has been fantastically supportive, and I'm very blessed to have a board president he himself is a sitting superintendent, Dr. Anthony Giordano. So he gets where we're at. But I engaged the board saying, listen, I'm not waiting until the end of June or July for state guidance. We need to have this conversation. I want parents to leave in June knowing we have a plan, what the options are, and that when the governor makes a decision in July or August, we can operationalize a plan and go. So in order to do that, we had a multi-phase effort. So I brought together 50 stakeholders from across the district. So we had nurses and guidance counselors, assistant principals, supervisors, teachers, custodians, bus drivers, right? 50 people on this task force. And we looked at the models of, states who already put out their plans. We looked at international models for countries that had gone back. We looked at the report from the New Jersey School Boards Association, the CDC recommendations, and also, when it comes to athletics, those national guidelines and the American Academy for Pediatrics. So we kind of digested all of that and came up with the idea that there's essentially going to be 4 options. Option 1 is what I like to call September 2019. Option 1 is that we go back and everything is normal. The likelihood of that, I think, is slim to none, but we want to prepare for that just in case. Option 2 is September 2019 with lots of social distancing and modifications. Option 3 is split schedule and hybrid schedules where kids are going to be A-Day, B-Day, or AM, PM, with some kids online, some kids in school. And then option 4 is virtual. And the thing that we keep saying is that we are prepped for all 4 options, but we can go into any of them, and we're going to go in and out of them. And, according to A3904, the legislation that went through in April, we have to be able to go virtual with 3 days notice. So that's now part of our forever emergency plans. And then with those 4 options, we looked at it and we broke into 5 subcommittees. 1 being operations and governance, 1 being personalized learning, which is basically curriculum instruction, 1 being personnel, 1 being finance, and then the other one being physical and mental health. And so those 5 committees tore into those 4 options. And for each of the options, each committee made 5 recommendations of things that we have to have done by August 1st to be prepped for whatever option the governor gives to us. And then also 5 concerns, basically what keeps us up at night, what things are we not going to be able to get done, even if we had until, September of the following year. So there's 100 recommendations and 100 concerns. But we then took that and we put it out to the full Board of Education, and we had board members participate in the committees. I presented it to the full board. I presented it via Facebook Live to my entire community, and we took input from parents and students, and I presented it to my local OEM, so the local Department of Health, the mayor, the police, all those folks. And so now we have this plan. We have deliverables that we have to achieve by August 1st. So for example, we need to come up with what do our split schedules look like in case that's what the governor says. So those will be done by August 1st, and now we're just awaiting the governor to make a decision.
Before we get into let's go a little bit into each of those
Sure.
plans. Well, the first plan, I kind of agree with you. You go back completely at normal. That's probably unlikely at this point. But what about plan 2, where you are, it's our traditional school, but with those social distancing parameters?
So I think that's
Pluses
where
and minuses.
Yeah, so the pluses and minuses are kids are back, teachers are back. I think there's going to be still stress, burnout, and all the other academic issues I spoke about. I foresee temperature checks. According to the current CDC guidelines, I foresee face coverings. And with face coverings, those may be masks, but those also might be face shields. But I think that's the minus on that is the difficulty. How do I keep a mask on a first grader? How do I keep a mask on a 8th grader, right? for different reasons. How are we going to do that? And then, there's going to be some kids and some staff members who can't come back to school because they're immunocompromised or live with someone who's immunocompromised. So inherent to this is that there are going to be some kids and teachers who remain on virtual learning, even if we're in school. So that is going to create, we're doing some virtual and we're back. So we're burning the wick at both ends then.
And your option 3 was a kind of a split schedule because trying to meet those social distancing. Yeah. With a little bit of virtual learning. How does that work, and where would you see as some of the issues there?
So that's the one that I dread the most, because that's going to put a burden on working families. So, I can just see it now, phase 3, Governor Murphy opens us up, and then God forbid we have to tell parents, oh, by the way, your kids are going to be home every other day. How does that impact working families? That's going to be crazy. Also, it's going to be a really stressful situation for teachers because they're going to have kids physically in front of them, either in an AM or PM split schedule or A-Day, B-Day, and they're going to be tending to their Google Classrooms for their virtual learners who are not in front of them that day. So that's a tremendous amount of pressure to put on our teaching staff. Option 3 is the one I like the least. Option 3 is the one that keeps me up at night the most.
Yeah, because you're asking teachers to do almost teach 2 classes
Yes.
time. And option 4 is what we have now, which is virtual learning.
Yeah, option 4 is what we have now. I think, though, to be completely honest, I think everyone's going to be a lot less forgiving. People understand that we went into this virtual closure in an emergency. I think folks are going to be much more demanding when it comes to more synchronous learning from everybody. I think they're going to be much more demanding about the delivery of interventions and special services and related services for special education students. And then, I was very lucky in Mount Olive that I reached out to our Wi-Fi provider, and we got Wi-Fi for every kid in the district. That's not feasible everywhere. So the digital divide is still present. I know there's legislators, Senator Ruiz and Assemblyman Charvelati are talking about, how do we bridge that gap? So there's still major equity issues, throughout the state on that. But that's the other thing that needs to be addressed. And once again, the social emotional toll of further isolation. The thing that keeps me up at night with that is, how do you start kindergarten with a child virtually who has never met their teacher? How does that work? I don't have the answer to
I
that.
just wanted, this has been a concern of mine, is you said it for kindergarten, but I think it's for every grade that in March, at least the teacher had set up a parameter. They had a relationship with their students. They all have expectations. I think it would be much harder in September to open virtually and try to build that relationship with a brand new teacher and new students. Do you see that as something that you have to work on too?
I think we have to prepare for that. That's going to be tough. One of the things we did discuss is the possibility of looping, even for a couple weeks. That there's a handoff between the previous teacher. That presents a tremendous, labor issue. I don't know how we do that, because you have teachers juggling, instead of 5 sections, now they have 10 sections. So, that's why I wanted us to get the head start and start considering these, externalities in May and June, rather than waiting and having a fire drill in August.
Yeah, and you mentioned it before that we don't have the state guidelines now as we're talking to each other. Probably have them a day, 2 days. Do you feel your plan can adapt to most of those? I mean, you'll have to adapt to something, but do you think this gives you flexibility to adapt to whatever those guidelines are?
Sure. So 2 things. One, I anticipate flexibility from the DOE, but I think because we're looking at the 4 options, and we also use the spreadsheet that the DOE used, looking at from the Council for Chief State School Officers. We use the same spreadsheets to vet through these issues. So I think we're going to be pretty much in line with what the DOE puts out. And I anticipate flexibility. And like I said, the idea is that we can execute any one of those 4 options at any point in time, because in September, we may come back, but then by Thanksgiving, we might go virtual again. So, my community, my students, my parents, my administrators and teachers are prepped that there's 4 options that could happen at any point in time next year.
And so I just want to reiterate what you said. You have those 4 options, but there's a chance you may have to use 2 of them. You may have to open and go virtual, or you may start virtual and then go to option 2. So is that part of the plan too?
Absolutely. So part of the plan is the flexibility. Yeah, we can transition from option 2 to option 4, and then back again.
All right. You said it a couple times, things that keep you up at night. I'm sure there's a lot of things keeping you up at night at this point. And not just you, all superintendents and actually all educators. So what do you see as the biggest challenge, one that you hope doesn't occur? Well, there's a lot of things you hope doesn't occur. What's the biggest challenge you see?
My biggest challenge the biggest worry at night are the disaffected kids, right? So there are kids who, even in a regular school environment, are disengaged because they have issues going on in their lives, depression, other things. So this has just made that worse. And you can teach math and social studies virtually, but it's very hard to do interventions when it comes to mental health virtually. And those are the things that really concern me, and that social emotional piece for our kids.
Okay. I'd like to thank Dr. Robert Zywicki, the superintendent of Mount Olive School District in Morris County, Western Morris County, for discussing his plan and how he's trying to move forward now. Thank you, Dr. Zywicki.
Thank you so much.
And that brings us to the end of this Education Matters. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you.